They say that when your gut tells you something's wrong, you should listen. I wish I had listened earlier. My name is Ryan. I'm 34 years old. I've been married to Sarah for 7 years. We met in college. She was the extroverted art student who lit up every room, and I was the quiet finance major who somehow managed to win her heart. Our relationship wasn't always perfect, but I believed we had something real, something worth fighting for. For most of our marriage, things were steady. We both had jobs we liked. She worked as a graphic designer at a boutique agency, while I was in a mid-level management role at a bank. We had plans, talked about kids, looked at houses, even started saving for IVF because Sarah had been struggling to conceive. We were a team. Or so I thought. It started subtly. A few months ago, Sarah began going to the gym more frequently. She said she wanted to feel better about herself. I supported it, of course. She even hired a personal trainer, Mark, a guy she met at the gym who apparently specialized in helping women with PCOS manage weight and fitness. I never met him, but I heard his name enough to know it by heart. Then came the announcement. "Hey, babe," she said one evening. "The girls and I are planning a trip to Miami next month. Just a quick getaway, you know. Spa, cocktails, sun, nothing crazy." "Who's going?" I asked casually, stirring the pasta sauce on the stove. "Jenna, Mel and Chloe," she replied, not looking up from her phone. All of them were names I recognized, her close friends. So I smiled and said, "Sounds like fun. You deserve it." But something felt off. I couldn't explain it then. It was just a flicker of discomfort in my chest. Maybe it was the way she avoided eye contact when I asked about the details, or how she immediately tucked her phone away when I walked into the room. But I pushed the thought aside. I didn't want to be that husband, the controlling, paranoid one. The weeks leading up to the trip were strange. Sarah became more distant. Not cold, exactly. Just distracted. She laughed less, barely touched me, and was glued to her phone at all hours. When I walked in on her texting, she'd flip the screen down instantly. Once she even took a shower with her phone on the sink. She never did that before. Then came the call. It was 2 nights before her supposed girls' trip. I was home alone while she was at a late gym session. My phone buzzed. Jenna was calling. "Hey, Ryan," she said hesitantly. "Is Sarah okay?" "Yeah. Why?" "She told me she's sick and won't be coming to Miami with us. I just wanted to check in." My stomach twisted. "What?" I said, trying to keep my voice level. "She told me you 3 were all going together." There was a long silence. "Wait, she told you she was going with us?" "Yeah. She said it was a girls' trip." Jenna didn't respond for a few seconds. Then she let out a low breath. "Ryan, I don't know what's going on, but I haven't seen Sarah in weeks. We haven't planned any trip. I thought maybe she just needed space." When I hung up, my hands were trembling. My first thought was, there must be some mistake. But the longer I sat there, staring at the blank screen, the more I realized something was very, very wrong. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was racing, flipping through every interaction we'd had over the past few months. Every excuse, every white lie, the gym sessions, the late meetings, the sudden girls' trip. All of it clicked together into a horrifying possibility. She was cheating. I didn't want to believe it. But I needed proof. So I did something I'm not proud of. I dug into our shared tech. We'd bought an iPad together a couple years ago, an older model we rarely used. Sarah had used it to watch Netflix or sketch when her laptop was charging. I remembered it was still linked to her iCloud, heart pounding. I turned it on. It took a few tries to remember the passcode. My fingers shook as I entered our anniversary, her usual password for everything. I was in, the Messages app was open, the most recent thread was titled Mark, Jim. I tapped it, and that's when my world collapsed. I can't wait to finally spend the whole weekend with you. It's been torture pretending around Ryan. Let's make this trip unforgettable. Photo after photo. Him shirtless in a hotel mirror. Her in lingerie I had never seen. Conversations about room service, champagne, beach massages, things we hadn't done as a couple in years. The trip wasn't with the girls, it was with him. I sat there for hours, reading every disgusting message. Rage boiled in my veins, but so did heartbreak. I wanted to scream, to throw the iPad across the room, but I needed it. It was evidence. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called in sick. Sarah kissed me goodbye at 8 a.m. sharp, dragging her small pink suitcase behind her. "Don't miss me too much," she said playfully. I watched her Uber drive away from the window. Then I opened my laptop and booked a flight to Miami. I didn't know what I'd do when I got there. All I knew was that I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed confirmation that I wasn't just imagining things, that the woman I loved hadn't become a stranger overnight. The flight was in the afternoon. I arrived in Miami late evening, just as the sun was setting. I used Find My iPhone to track the iPad's location. It was pinging from a resort near the beach, a 5-star place, fancy, romantic. The kind of hotel you take someone you're trying to impress, not your workout partner. I booked a cheap motel across the street. That night, I stood outside the resort's restaurant with a baseball cap and sunglasses. I felt ridiculous, like some amateur spy. But then I saw them, Sarah and Mark. She was wearing a short red dress I hadn't seen before. Her hair was curled. She looked happy, carefree, younger, like the version of her I hadn't seen in years. They were laughing, holding hands across the table. He leaned in and kissed her. She kissed him back, like it was the most natural thing in the world, like I didn't exist. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I turned and walked back to my motel, where I stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering what the hell I was going to do. I could confront them right there, make a scene. But part of me wanted more. Not just revenge, closure. I needed to know how long, how deep, how much of our life had been a lie. I needed to plan this carefully. The next morning in Miami felt surreal. I woke up in the cheap motel, the smell of mildew clinging to the air, my head pounding from a night of no sleep. Sunlight bled through the blinds, too bright for how dark I felt inside. My wife was across the street, sleeping next to another man, completely unaware that I was watching everything unfold from just a stone's throw away. I stared at the iPad, tracking her location like a lifeline. She was still at the resort. Around 9:30 a.m., the dot started to move. She was heading to the resort's breakfast buffet, still inside the premises. I couldn't risk being seen, so I waited. I watched from a bench near the beachside trail where tourists jogged past, completely unaware of the storm raging inside me. By 11 a.m., the GPS ping showed them at the spa. Later, I watched them emerge hand in hand, bathrobes still on, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. Sarah looked relaxed, too relaxed. She never looked like that with me anymore. The way she leaned into him, playfully swatting his chest as he kissed her forehead. It was like watching a different woman. I snapped photos with my phone, zooming in from across the street like some pathetic private investigator. I hated every second of it, but I needed proof. Not just for me, but for everyone who'd call me crazy when I finally exposed what she was doing. Later that day, I followed them to the beach. They lay on a pair of chairs under a shaded cabana, sipping frozen drinks and taking selfies. She rested her head on his chest. He whispered something that made her giggle like a schoolgirl. I couldn't help but think, this is the woman I held in my arms on our wedding night. The woman I planned a family with. The one I defended to everyone, even when she pushed me away emotionally. What did I do to deserve this? Then I remembered something worse. We were actively trying for a baby. IVF was expensive, draining, but Sarah had insisted it was worth it, that we were worth it, and here she was, sleeping with another man in a luxury resort while pretending to be on a girls' trip. That night, I went back to my motel and opened the iPad again. I needed more. I scrolled through more messages between Sarah and Mark, voice notes, emojis, hidden jokes. They'd clearly been seeing each other for months, maybe longer. Mark, I wish I'd met you before Ryan. You deserve someone who actually sees you. Sarah, he's a good guy, just not for me anymore. I feel alive with you. And then one that shattered me. If I get pregnant, it's ours, not his. I want you to be the father. I stopped breathing. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped. The iPad. She was planning a future with him. I wanted to storm into their room and scream. Break something. Break him. But no, I wasn't going to react like some furious idiot and hand them control over the narrative. No. I would expose them on my terms. I needed to get inside that room. The next day, I put on a collared shirt and approached the front desk at the resort. I had memorized Mark's full name from the iCloud calendar. He had actually booked the room under his name. Ballsy. Hi, I said to the front desk agent, smiling politely. I'm Mark Wallace. I think I left my wallet in my room earlier. Can I grab a spare key? She looked me up and down, hesitated for a moment, then said, Of course, Mr. Wallace. Room 412. I couldn't believe how easy it was. The moment I walked into the room, I was hit by the scent of her perfume. Familiar, but now disgusting. I stood frozen for a second. Then I moved. I opened drawers, scanned the room quickly. I wasn't going to steal anything. I just needed evidence. I found it everywhere. A receipt from a couple's massage, signed Sarah and Mark. Condom wrappers in the trash. Her pink nightgown draped over the chair, the same one she wore on our honeymoon. But the worst part? Her notebook, the one she always used to sketch. I opened it. Inside were little drawings, beach views, champagne, glasses, and a few of him. And on the last page, in her handwriting, maybe Mark is what I was missing all along. I took photos of everything. Then I saw her phone on the bedside table. I knew the passcode. I typed it in. More texts. One from just that morning. Mark. Last night was the best night of my life. I want to wake up to you forever. Sarah. Let's make this weekend our beginning. Our beginning. Like I had never existed. I placed the phone back, took one final look at the room, and walked out quietly. That night, I sat on the beach for hours. Waves crashed in front of me, and couples strolled along the shoreline holding hands. I felt numb, like I was floating outside my body. I didn't sleep. At 5:30 a.m., I got up and walked to the hotel entrance. They were scheduled to fly home that day. I planned to beat them back, but I couldn't leave without one last move. I dropped an envelope at the hotel desk, marked, For room 412, urgent. Inside was a printed photo of Sarah and Mark kissing, next to a copy of her text that said, If I get pregnant, it's ours, not his. Below it I wrote, You'll both get exactly what you deserve. Enjoy the flight home. I landed back in our city by afternoon. When Sarah walked in that evening, she smiled as if everything was normal. I'm home, she chirped, dropping her bag at the door. Miss me? I just stood there, calm, quiet. She froze. Ryan? She said slowly. I picked up the iPad and handed it to her. Check your messages, Sarah. You left something behind. She opened it. Her face went pale, then gray. She tried to speak, but no words came out. I looked her in the eyes and said, I know everything. She sank onto the couch like her legs had given out. For the first time in our 7 years of marriage, Sarah was speechless. She just sat there, clutching the iPad like it was a grenade that had already exploded in her hands. Her face contorted. Confusion, panic, guilt, then finally tears. But they didn't move me, not this time. "I can explain," she whispered hoarsely. "No," I said firmly. "You can't." She opened her mouth again, but I cut her off. "I know everything, Sarah. The fake girls' trip, the hotel, Mark, your messages, your notebook, the spa, the beach, the massage receipts. I even saw you two kissing." She blinked in shock. "Yeah," I continued. "I followed you. I flew to Miami. I stayed across the street. I watched everything." A pause. I saw something shift in her eyes, fear giving way to something colder. "Calculation. I made a mistake," she said, suddenly switching tactics. "I was confused. You've been distant, Ryan. You barely touched me anymore. I felt invisible." "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "Don't you dare try to turn this on me. I'm not— You cheated on me while we were trying to have a child. You lied to my face, used our IVF money to take your personal trainer on a damn vacation, and you lied to your friends to cover it up. You planned this for weeks." Her face twisted. "I didn't plan. I didn't mean for it to happen like this." I pulled out the envelope I'd prepared earlier. Photos, screenshots, voice notes, receipts. "I've already contacted a lawyer," I said. "I have everything I need." She froze again. Then the crying started. Full sobs, shaking, shoulders the whole performance. If I hadn't seen what I saw, maybe I'd have believed it. Maybe I'd have fallen for her tears again, just like I had in the past. But now I knew better. "I was lonely," she wept. "You were always at work. Mark just made me feel seen. It wasn't serious." "Don't lie to me," I said. "You told him you wanted to have his baby? You called him the beginning of your new life?" Her jaw dropped. She hadn't expected me to read everything. She tried again. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was scared." "Scared of what? Being a decent human being?" More silence. That night she slept in the guest room. I couldn't bear to be near her. The next morning, I took the day off work again and called my lawyer. We started the divorce paperwork. Clean and swift, no children, no shared house. She could keep her clothes and the few pieces of furniture she brought into the marriage. I wanted nothing but my peace. When I came back home that evening, she was sitting in the kitchen, makeup smeared, still wearing the same shirt from the day before. "You're really doing this?" she asked, her voice dull. "You already did it," I replied. She looked down at the table, fiddling with her wedding ring. "You're not even going to try to forgive me?" "You didn't make a mistake, Sarah. You made a series of choices, over and over. Every time you texted him, every lie you told me, every night you spent in his arms, you chose this," she sniffled. "So that's it? 7 years gone?" "No," I said. 7 years wasted. There's a difference." The fallout came fast. 2 days later, I emailed her parents with a brief professional explanation. Infidelity, trip to Miami, lawyer involved. I attached screenshots. Her dad responded with a single sentence. "I'm ashamed of her. I'm so sorry, Ryan." Her mom called me in tears, begging me to reconsider. I told her I appreciated her kindness, but there was no saving this. Her best friend Jenna, bless her soul, sent me a message that just said, "I knew something was wrong. You didn't deserve this." Word got around. Quietly, but fast. Sarah's social circle shrank overnight. People who once envied our marriage started unfollowing her on Instagram, texting me privately to express shock. Then came the message from Mark. Yes, Mark. He sent it through Facebook. I debated whether to open it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey, Ryan. I didn't know she was still with you. She told me you were separated for months." I stared at the screen. "I'm sorry. If I had known the truth, I never would have. He trailed off. Typical coward. I didn't reply. Instead, I saved the message, just in case. The divorce proceeded quickly, surprisingly so. Sarah didn't fight me. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe the shame was too much. Or maybe Mark bailed on her the second things. Got real. Either way, I didn't care. But just when I thought things were settling, another bomb dropped. 3 weeks after filing, she called me. I debated ignoring the call. But something told me to answer. She sounded different. Not crying. Not apologizing. "Ryan," she said quietly, "I need to talk to you. It's important." I waited. "I'm pregnant." Silence. My mind froze. "I'm almost 7 weeks," she continued. "I didn't know how to tell you, but I've been to the doctor. I thought you should know." My hands clenched into fists. "Is it mine?" I think so," she stammered. We tried, remember? It lines up, I swear." "No," I said coldly. "You don't get to swear anything anymore." "I'll do a test," she said, quickly. "A paternity test. I didn't want you to find out through someone else. I thought you deserved to know." I ended the call. That night I couldn't sleep again. What if it was mine? What if my child was now caught in the mess she created? But deep down, a cold, bitter voice whispered, "What if it's not?" 2 weeks later, we did the test. 3 more days passed. The results arrived by email. I clicked the file, scanned to the line that mattered. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. I sat back in the chair. Numb, empty. Then, slowly, I laughed. Not from joy, not from pain. Just the sheer absurdity of it all. She wasn't just unfaithful. She wasn't just dishonest. She was careless, irresponsible, reckless enough to carry another man's child and try to pin it on me. I forwarded her the result. No words, just the file. 2 hours later, she replied, "I'm so sorry. I don't expect anything from you. I understand." That was the last time we spoke. Weeks turned into months. The divorce finalized. I moved into a smaller apartment, bought new furniture, threw away the old bed. I started therapy. Took long walks without looking over my shoulder. Rediscovered silence. Peaceful silence. I stopped tracking her on social media. I blocked her number. Her existence no longer concerned me. But one evening, Jenna messaged me again. "She's having a rough time," she wrote. Everyone turned. On her, even Mark. He ghosted her after the paternity test. Her parents cut her off. She lost her job. Some coworker leaked the story. I stared at the screen for a while, then replied, "That's not my problem anymore." 6 months. That's how long it had been since I exposed everything. Since I found out the woman I planned to build a family with was carrying someone else's child while lying to my face. Since the divorce papers were finalized and I erased her from my phone, my heart, my life. You'd think I'd feel free by now. Lighter. Better. And in some ways, I did. I could breathe again. The apartment was quiet, but it was peaceful. I got back into old hobbies. Running, woodworking, late-night jazz vinyls. I even reconnected with some old friends I had distanced myself from during the marriage. I hadn't realized how isolated I'd become until the silence turned from haunting to healing. But trauma has a way of lingering, doesn't it? Some nights I'd wake up from dreams where she was still beside me, laughing, whispering, or worse, where we were happy, still together. Where I didn't know. Those were the hardest to wake from because they felt real. And when I opened my eyes and saw the empty side of the bed, it all came rushing back, but I reminded myself every day, better alone than betrayed. Then came the call I never expected. It was a Wednesday evening. I had just gotten home from a long day at work and was heating up leftovers when my phone rang. No caller ID. I hesitated, but answered. Ryan. Her voice. I felt my grip tighten on the phone. I didn't say anything. Please don't hang up, she said quickly. Just, please. 1 minute. That's all I ask. I exhaled through my nose, silent. I'm not okay, she said. Everything's falling apart. My parents won't talk to me. Mark blocked me. I'm raising this baby alone. I lost my job. My friends won't return my calls. I have nothing, Ryan. Nothing. I still didn't speak. I know I deserve this, she continued. I do. I don't expect sympathy, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Truly. I ruined everything. I destroyed the one person who actually loved me. That broke my silence. No, Sarah, I said coldly. You didn't destroy me. You freed me. She was quiet for a beat, then quietly. Are you seeing anyone? That question punched me in the gut. No, I replied flatly. But even if I were, it wouldn't matter. I miss you, she whispered. You miss who I was, I said. The man who loved you blindly, who would have walked through fire for you. You don't miss me, Sarah. You miss what I gave you. Security, stability, forgiveness. She started crying. I wish I could go back, she choked. Undo it. Erase it all. But you can't, I said. You made your choice, repeatedly. You didn't just stumble once, Sarah. You lived a double life. Lied with a straight face, slept in his arms while I was planning baby names. I know, she sobbed. God, I know. I hate myself every day. I had to say it, out loud. I'm sorry, even if it means nothing to you now. I let her cry. Then finally I said, I hope your kid doesn't grow up thinking lies are normal. For their sake, I hope you grow up too. I hung up. That night, I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't even feel angry. I felt closure. She was broken, yes, but not because she was punished. She was broken because she finally saw the mess she made. Not just the ashes of our marriage, but the crater she left behind in her own life. It wasn't karma. It was consequence. Still, I couldn't help but feel something else too. Pity. Not enough to forgive her, but enough to know I'd moved on further than she ever could. 2 weeks later, Jenna reached out again. I ran into her today. She texted. She looks rough. The baby's a few months old. She's living with some cousin now, working part-time. Doesn't talk much. Said she still dreams about you every night. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. A few months after that, I got an invitation to a wedding. It was from my best friend, Adam. His fiancée, Melissa, had been planning this for a year. I wasn't sure I'd go. I wasn't ready to see love so publicly celebrated again. But I said yes. At the reception, under string lights and laughter, I found myself at a table with someone new. Her name was Lily. We talked for hours, first about surface stuff, then about real things. I told her about the divorce, the betrayal, the silence. She listened, not with pity, but with understanding. She had gone through something similar years ago. We exchanged numbers. Weeks turned into months. Dates turned into something more. With her, I didn't feel like a man recovering from war. I felt human again. Seen. Not for my pain, but for who I was beyond it. And that's when I realized Sarah's betrayal didn't ruin me. It revealed me. It showed me what I was capable of surviving, what I deserved, what I'd never accept again. 1 day, while cleaning out an old drawer, I found the wedding ring. It was in a small velvet box, tucked under old receipts and spare keys. I stared at it for a while, cold, heavy, meaningless now. I took it to the nearest pawn shop and sold it. With the money, I bought a weekend getaway for Lily and me. Somewhere quiet, peaceful, by the ocean, the kind of trip that didn't need to be a secret. It had been almost a year since the Miami trip, a year since my marriage imploded in front of my eyes. And yet, life was good. I had found peace, clarity, and most importantly, myself. Lily and I had become serious. She was everything Sarah wasn't. Honest, grounded, kind. With her, there were no games, no cryptic texts or secret getaways. Just quiet mornings, genuine laughter, and someone who made me feel safe. That's why what happened next shook me more than I ever expected. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon when I got the email. Subject: Important information regarding Sarah Wallace. I stared at it for a few seconds, thought about deleting it, but something made me click. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. The message was brief. Dear Mr. Ryan Wallace, we are reaching out regarding an ongoing matter involving a former partner of yours, Sarah Wallace. Due to unforeseen circumstances, involving the paternity and custody of a minor child, we request your presence for a brief deposition. Please contact us immediately at the number below. My stomach dropped. What the hell did this mean? I hadn't spoken to Sarah since that final call, hadn't seen her, heard nothing about the baby since Jenna's last message. It was done. Still, something in that email unsettled me. I called the number. The woman on the line was polite, professional, and vague. She simply asked if I could come in for a meeting the following morning. I agreed, reluctantly. Curiosity, after all, is a powerful drug. The next day, I walked into a glass office building, sat in a stiff leather chair, and waited. The door opened. A young attorney entered, folder in hand. He smiled, shook my hand, and said, Mr. Wallace, thank you for coming. We just need to confirm a few things for our case. I narrowed my eyes. What kind of case? He opened the folder. Inside was a photo, Sarah, and a baby. She's filing for child support, he said simply. I laughed. Out loud. You must be joking, I said. We did a paternity test. The baby isn't mine. He nodded. We saw that. However, she listed you on the original birth certificate as the father. What? Apparently she never updated it after the test. And since you were legally married at the time of conception, under state law, you're presumed the father, unless officially removed from the certificate. My head spun. You're telling me I could be financially responsible for another man's child? Technically, yes, he said. Unless a motion is filed to contest paternity and it's granted by the court. I felt like the room was shrinking. But she knows I'm not the father, I said. She admitted it. I have the test results. She may claim she was coerced or emotionally distressed when she agreed to the test, he replied calmly. I'm not saying you'll lose, but she's filed, which means you'll need to respond. This had to be a nightmare. I walked out of that building angrier than I'd been in months. Not because I feared the outcome. I knew the truth was on my side, but because this woman, this vortex of destruction, still had the power to drag me back into her mess. That night, I told Lily everything. I expected her to be shocked, furious. She just nodded. File the motion, she said. Clear your name. Don't let her win. I kissed her, grateful and angry all over again. A week later, my attorney filed on my behalf. Sarah didn't show up to the first hearing. The judge rescheduled. The second time she arrived late, looking worn down, tired, and desperate. She didn't make eye contact with me once. I expected her to fight, but to my surprise, she didn't. Her lawyer stood up and announced that Sarah was withdrawing the claim, that she acknowledged I wasn't the father and had made a mistake in listing me. Apparently, her own family threatened to cut her off entirely if she dragged me further into her chaos. After the hearing, as I was leaving the courtroom, she approached. "Me, Ryan," she said softly. I stopped. I didn't mean to. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I panicked. I had no one. I'm sorry. I looked her dead in the eye. "You had a choice, Sarah. You always had a choice. You just never chose decency." She swallowed hard, then nodded. I hope she grows up better than I did," she said, glancing down at a photo of her daughter in her phone. "Then stop using her like a weapon," I said, and walked away. That was the last time I ever saw Sarah, but it wasn't the end of the story. A few months later, something happened that truly closed the loop. Lily and I were out shopping for a new coffee table. We walked into a vintage furniture shop downtown, and as I was inspecting an old oak piece, I noticed the store clerk looking at me strangely. "Sorry," she said. "I don't mean to be rude, but are you Ryan?" "Yes," she smiled. "I knew it. I used to follow your ex-wife's art account. She posted about you all the time, before, you know." I forced a smile. "Yeah, those days are long gone," she nodded. "Well, I just wanted to say, I saw what she posted recently. She wrote this whole open letter thing about what she did, took full accountability, said you were the best thing that ever happened to her and that she hopes you're living your best life." I blinked. "She posted it where?" "Reddit," the clerk said. "Some cheating confessions thread. It went viral." Later that night, curiosity got the better of me. I searched for it, and there it was. Title: I cheated on the best man I ever knew. Now I'm alone, raising a child who will never know him. It was her. All of it. The girl's trip, the affair, the paternity lie. She didn't name me, but I knew every line was about us. She didn't ask for sympathy, didn't play the victim. She just owned it. And then one line stood out. "If by some chance you ever read this, Ryan, I want you to know. I understand now. You didn't walk away from me. You walked back to yourself. And I hope you never look back." I didn't reply. Didn't upvote. Didn't comment. I just closed the tab, turned off my phone, walked out onto the balcony where Lily was sipping wine, watching the sun dip behind the skyline. I wrapped my arms around her, and for the first time in a long time, I knew. The why. Past no longer owned me. The pain no longer defined me. And the truth, though brutal, had set me free.